Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 7 of Beneath the Surface, an A&G Concrete Pools podcast. As always, I am your host, Luke Hannon, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Thom Jones, president of the Education Foundation. How are you doing today, Thom?
I'm doing great. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Luke.
Hey, it's great to have you. We're excited. You're our first partner from the community to be on the show, so I'm thrilled to see what stories that you're going to have. I know that you have so much experience under your belt and so much integration within Port St. Lucie and the larger Treasure Coast area. But I think the best place to start is probably at the beginning. What's been your journey first to this area of the country, but then to your position at the Education Foundation?
Well, actually, if I go back a little bit, I was a career banker, so I was a businessman. And my wife and I moved down to Florida because she had family here. And I was probably at the top of my game, and I decided that I just wanted to kind of get out, and I came down to Florida. But within a couple of weeks, I found another job in banking, So I went back to work a little bit. But I had an opportunity probably about, 10 years ago now, to retire early from commercial banking. And so I took the offer, and it was actually my daughter. I was just sitting home, and she says, "Well, what's next, Dad?" And I said, "I don't know, Erica." She says, "I know what's next for you. It's children. You've always wanted to help children. Why don't you just do that? You're still young enough to have another career. Don't just sit home and play golf, So I said, okay. So actually what I did was I walked into Indian River State College, and I presented my credentials, I have a master's degree. And they said, "You're hired." I said, "For what?" They said, "Business organizational management and finance." I said, "Okay." So I started to teach that a little bit just on the side, but I always had a passion for marketing. So you and I have something very similar, in our background. And but I didn't have the degree of all things, even though I had worked in marketing all my life. My master's was mostly in the finance. But I quickly got that extra 15 credits that I needed, and I've been teaching mostly marketing classes at IRSC. So I had that going on, and I volunteered myself to be on the board of the Education Foundation. And there was a tragedy there where the gentleman that ran it died at his office. He was a friend of mine. So the board and we sort of picked up the pieces and tried to keep it going. And they offered me the job, and I said, "I'll take it for a few years." So here I am now 10 years later. But for me, it's been a good journey. I think it was the right time in my life. And I learned a lot about K through 12 education, which I didn't know. And the Education Foundation was formed by the school board back in 1990. And it's the only 501c3 in the county that is headquartered inside the school district offices. So it's a very unique position. And I realized that, so I said, I'm going to do? I'm going to walk the halls and learn about public education at the K through 12 level and just learn about it. And I did that, and very open, and I didn't have I'm not hired by them, I'm paid by them, meaning I'm not on staff, but I have a position, there, and it's sort of like a license, and I started learning about what the needs were. And so our job is to elevate public education in whatever capacity that surfaces. And I focus it almost exclusively on academics. So we're a little bit different from other agencies, only because we were created by the board and we're resident inside the school district. So I watch what they're doing a lot. And so I pivoted from a business person to a person that's trying to support public education. And I'll just dive into this other philosophical part of me, and we were chatting about it a little bit. But if you look at a child, a child is born with no neurons, and they're like a blank computer in a way, right? And however, by the age of 2 years old, they have developed 80% of their neurons in their brain. And neurons is what creates memory. It creates all of our speeches, and it creates learning. So as you learn, the neurons connect. But the growth of the neurons themselves are really 80% developed by 2 years old. And I was shocked by that fact. I couldn't believe it at first. So you have a child that's 2 years old, and they've been nurtured by their environment, their parents, their home, or their extended caregivers. And then they come into the school district at about 4 years old, because 4 years is pre-K, and then 5 years old is kindergarten. And then I learned that students learn to read up to the third grade, and then read to learn beyond that. So those were just facts that I learned by working with the school district. And then I came across a fact, and I couldn't believe it at first either, so I went to the school district to validate it. But I read that nationally, and it's the same here locally, that 80% of the dropouts from high school can't read proficiently by the third grade. So they're not reading up the level by the third grade, and you continue on. What's going to happen is you're not going to graduate. Okay, so that means you're going to have a lower paying job. You have lower opportunity just by the fact of your lack of education, and that leads to poverty. And for me, poverty is insidious. It hurts an individual. It causes them pain, and it's the root of a lot of our social problems today. So if you follow those breadcrumb trails back to third grade, you say that's a point, an inflection point, okay, that's really important. So we have to make sure that more and more of our students, learn to read proficiently by that age, and then they have the equal opportunity to grow with the school district. Now, the school district today, for the first time ever, is A-rated. Mm-hmm. And I can't overstate that, the value of that. So what's happening is if the student stays with their curriculum, they're going to graduate work ready or career focused, but they will graduate with an elevated education more so than someone 10 years ago with the same experience. Mm-hmm. And now our challenge as a society or as a county is to ensure that those individuals will have an opportunity for a higher paying job. So we want to educate them. We want them to read well. We want them to graduate work ready or career focused. And then we have our community has a better opportunity of keeping those young people here.
Yeah, how important do you think that is? I mean, we are at such a precipice with St. Lucie County. We have such expansion, particularly I think over the past half decade.
Right.
How important do you think it is to retain a lot of those individuals? Because as you mentioned, we have an A-rated school system now. We know that the education level is higher than it's ever been before. When those kids go off to college and then achieve in all that they do, whether that is a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, pursuing law school, something like that, how is it important to bring those kids back to St. Lucie County to continue to elevate what we're trying to do here?
Well, it's important for the whole community. It's important to the businesses, the local businesses. They're always looking for talent. And look at A&G Pools. They have a magnificent product line, and it takes a huge team to create that. It takes someone to do design, someone to do all of the engineering work, someone to actually begin the construction process. So you have a whole group of levels, different levels of individuals that need qualified talent at various levels. And that's what we need. We need those people to stay here and have the opportunity to plug in somewhere and have a great life. St. Lucie County historically was agricultural based, okay? It has a lot of poverty in it, okay? It just does. And so if we can break that cycle of poverty, then everyone will have a better chance of getting a better job. And I think that's within our grasp now as a community, because the community cares about education, they care about kids, and we're still growing. And I think we're kind of lucky that there's a lot of businesses that actually want to connect with that. And that was one of the reasons why the legislator in the state of Florida back in the 1980s created these education foundations. And by the way, Florida is one of the few states in the union that has this model where there's one education foundation authorized in each county. And the goal is to connect to the community, and it's to help innovate academic programs, and then to unlock the potential of every child, and then we can all sit back and celebrate the success. And so that's what we do. Those metrics are near and dear to me. And I kind of knew that, but I've elevated that myself and as part of my narrative. So of all of the wonderful nonprofits in this county, and there are many, and they all should be applauded, there are very few in the education space, but even fewer yet that are supporting the academic progress. So every day I meet with the staff, the Office of Teaching and Learning, the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, the chief academic officer, principals, and teachers, and we're having conversations, and they're telling us their needs, and we're trying to fill those needs to ensure that the student has a better experience it's a long goal, but I think we can begin the journey as a community to try and really change the economic forces. And here's another fact: 51% of the students that are tested when they come into kindergarten at 4 years old are have a deficit reading proficiency to their age. Okay, so they're not reading at the pre-literacy level. So now, and that's just a challenge. So public schools take everybody. So those students, and some of them, 50% of those students, don't speak English as a primary language. So as they come in, okay, and the school district is doing that, we need to work with them, elevate them quickly, and get them to read proficiently in English, and then they're on their way. Fortunately, within that span of kindergarten to third grade, a student is still a sponge and they'll learn it. So they can catch up. That's the good news.
Having St. Lucie County as such sort of a multicultural community and having those individuals with different backgrounds, not necessarily being native English speakers, how has that put different challenges forth for the education system, but at the same time, I'm sure offers a pretty unique perspective that might be on a more homogenous community?
Absolutely. A diverse community, and there's studies on this, okay, are much more vibrant, okay? Mm-hmm. We all need life experiences and cultures to come together. And people could pick up English pretty quickly. Now, adults it takes longer. My mother was Japanese, mm-hmm. came over to the United States legally, and didn't speak the language. Struggled with it all her life, but she was proficient at some point. But, her educational level in Japan was relatively high for a woman of that time. Mm. And yet she probably, and she said this, I probably have the educational level of someone that's in the 5th grade because of her reading skills and all that. But she opened the door for her children to be English speakers and all that stuff. So anyway, it can happen. But once you have this community of diverse people, and there are models out there, I just spoke to some people in Atlanta they have a couple of these models in Florida. They want me to see them because I think it's time for that conversation, okay? We could go into a neighborhood that is struggling, and we could open the doors economically and educationally, and I know all kinds of diverse people will come to that neighborhood and elevate it. So a child has their experience through what surrounds them. Mm-hmm. So if they're surrounded by a vibrant community, surrounded by a good school, faith-based services, and it's safe, then they're all going to thrive. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay, yeah. It goes back to college, okay? And Abraham Maslow nailed it 100 years ago. He said, if you're down at the base level, it's like a pyramid. It has a base. And the base is where you're just struggling to maintain your lifestyle because your needs are physiological, okay? That's where you're staying. You're not looking for self-actualization. It's just not there right now. Everyone can get there. So we need to elevate that a little bit more at a time. And we're all social animals, so community is important. And I think we can do that. And I think the United States is very unique. I've traveled the world, okay, and I've seen countries that are basically monogamous in their racial mix, okay? I'm half Japanese, so I went to Japan, and they all look the same. I look kind of like them, but I'm a halfie, right? So, but there's a certain culture that develops by that, especially island people, okay? But in the United States, it's very different. You have all these mixes. And that rainbow, I think, is great. I think it's going to be fine. This country's potential is unlimited because of that. Because people come in here and they add to the mix. So I think it's all good. And this county is changing very rapidly. We have a lot of immigrants coming in. We have a lot of, and it's sort of age. It's different by age because if you look at some individuals are senior citizens and they're coming here to enjoy Florida as a paradise. So they're coming in with a little more wealth, a little more stability. They don't have children, but they're looking to live the good lifestyle. But they've lived a rich life and they want to give back. Then you have the people that are born and raised here. They want to go through the school district and stay here. Then you have individuals that come into the community. Maybe they're coming in from the south where it's more crowded, or they're coming in from the north where it's cold or whatever, and they settle on this midway point called St. Lucie County. I think we have a good, rich pipeline of individuals to help this community really thrive.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things, and I know our involvement with the Education Foundation as a company is kind of rooted in that, is there's such a unique opportunity here, and that is partially by the things that we control and individuals such as yourself playing such pivotal roles in making sure that the generations that are coming up now are given every opportunity, that they have all the tools at their disposal, but also things like simple geography. Like you mentioned, not being so close to an area like Miami or the Keys gives us kind of a bit of space. If you don't want a kind of city or metropolitan lifestyle, you can find that here, but you're still not so far and away from things that you feel like you're stranded.
Yeah, we have a good mix. When people come up in the South, say, "Oh, it's nice to be in the country," right? And the people that live here, it's not the country anymore. Well, it is, And we don't really have traffic problems, but we have some more growth in traffic. And if I could use the talents of the students to help solve some of those community problems, and we have some programs, and I'd love to chat about them. We could help solve community issues. I'll just give you an example. I have a gentleman on my board. His name is James Abbott. He's a retired manager for Microsoft in the state of Washington. Okay, brilliant man. Okay, his story is, and he tells it to everyone, so I can repeat a little bit of it. He came from a broken family. Okay, so he was abandoned as a child, him and his brother, and his brothers, and they went into the foster care system, and it was a public school that saved his life through education. So they took him in and gave him a chance, and he already had the brain power, okay, but it was unlocked through the school district, and he got a job at Microsoft instantly, okay, and has a great career. So he comes here to Florida because his mother was here, and he wanted to take care of mom, and he knocks on the door of the Education Foundation, wants to get back to a public school district. So he did, and I welcomed him to the board. So he came up with the idea. He said, "Tom, what if we taught students to program in artificial intelligence to control our traffic lights to help with the growing traffic issues?" I said, "You can do that?" He goes, "Yeah." Now, he was an accountant at Microsoft, a digital accountant, right? And on the side, he programs in AI. So that's kind of the power that he has up in his brain, okay? And so I said, "Sure." So we pitched it with some school board members and the superintendent. And he said, "You can do that?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Do it." So it's an after-school program. It's in Centennial. We've got it, we started off with maybe 20 kids, and now we're down to maybe a half a dozen. We're going to bring some more in. But they are right now functional with software that can look at an intersection, okay, through a controller and traffic lights and cameras, and they can control the traffic. And at some point, if you connect them all, every camera will know what day it is, what the weather is like, what is the historic pattern for that day of the week. They'll know in real time what the traffic is looking like, and they're all talking to each other, and the traffic lights are changing on demand rather than changing on a timer. So, for instance, if there's an emergency, then the first responders get the clearance, and all the traffic lights go, here comes the fire truck, and they all change for the fire truck, and everyone eases off the path. So that's all possible today. Now, you can even do that today commercially. It costs you $1 million or so, but we're going to develop it and give it to the cities and the county. And so we're already developing it, and we had a showcase event at the school board room last week, and we demonstrated this, and it works. Okay, now we're going to certify it, make sure it's sound, but our goal is to give it to Port St. Lucie or Fort Pierce or the county and let them try it out, and we're there with them to stabilize it and grow it. And we'd like to do it throughout the state, actually, at some point in time, and software will be owned by the foundation. So that's a way of helping the community through technology and students. We have another idea where we want to bring the Indian River Lagoon, which is one of the largest subtropical lagoons in the United States, a very precious body of water that's under stress just due to the growth. Okay, so we want to connect community to the lagoon through the school district, through the kids. So we are now funding 2 marine and oceanographic laboratories, one at the middle level and one at the K through 5 level, to teach students about marine science. And then we've worked with the state of Florida, and we have an island that's on the Indian River Lagoon that we have access to. We call it Eco Education Island, and we're going to create an outdoor science classroom on the island. And so students are going to be in the laboratory learning about science. And we connected with FAU. Dr. Gabby McHenry is our resource there. And she's going to bring in college professors to teach kindergartners through this 5th grade at FK Suite in Fort Pierce about marine science and ecology. And then we're going to connect it very directly to what's happening in the lagoon through the experience on their boat and on our island. And so then we're going to elevate that science program, because science is so important to that. Another thing is early literacy. I talked about it in terms of stopping generational poverty. We focused like a laser on kindergarten about 5 years ago. And it was just me reading an article one day that said in kindergarten throughout the United States, there are no more toys. They took them out in the 90s. And when I grew up in kindergarten, I don't know about your experience, but we had all kinds of toys to play with. Mm-hmm. That's a curriculum called structured play. It was developed 100 years ago. But what structured play does, it helps a person with socialization, micro-coordination of hands, but it's also a pre-literacy curriculum through phonics. And phonics is taking the verbal language and linking it to the picture of the word. Like, say you have cat. And cat is, you say cat, you see a cat, and you see it spelled out. The brain begins to make the connection, and that's the pre-reading skill that kindergartners need, because you learn to read in the 1st grade. So we said, why don't we bring the toys back? So I talked to the district. I said, I asked them if they were familiar with structured play. They said, of course we are. It's been around forever. I said, you don't have any toys? They said, well, we somehow lost our funding on that. I said, well, I can bring them back. They said, really? I didn't have any money, really, okay, but I wanted to bring it back. And they said, okay. So I went out and talked to the business community. Mm-hmm. And I had some business people give me enough money to create 2 proof of concept programs, one in each school. And we created a 13 themed kits, like a big bin. You open it up, and let's say, let's build a pool. Okay, and in there was everything, and you would teach us how to do that, mm-hmm. right? Everything that they needed to build a pool. They need to design the pool. They need to, organize the crew to dig the pool, and then to build the pool, and then and to maintain the pool. And so that's a theme. That's a theme that like that we have. We have a theme that's actually, let's build a house. Okay, then we have let's go camping. Let's help at home. Let's be a restaurant owner. And they have all these play kits, okay? And they have one theme every week, and they have books with it too. So there's a connection to the reading side of it. And the early reading scores are now inching up, okay? And the idea is to set the stage for 1st grade. So now we're working on a K through 2 program where the focus is really on the 1st and the 2nd grade, because that's the precursor to the 3rd grade where you have all the testing, okay? And where we're trying to, really zero in on phonics. And that's an active program the district has to focus on, that the foundation is supporting. So we're always trying to connect the community to the classroom to really give the teacher better tools. I just had lunch with the principal. It's an A-rated school. She's one of the best principals in the entire school. I'll tell you everyone, her name is Anna Rodriguez, right over here in Alapata Flats, just down the street from us. She's magnificent. And she gets it, right? Okay? But she said, the school district has this program in need, but I could, do a little bit better if I had this need. So she has an ag program, and she has some science programs. And I find a lot of the science labs are not fully equipped. So we just go in and do that. We also have special needs students, okay? And we have sensory rooms in every school. It's mandated. But some of them were very old. And a sensory room was someone who maybe is on the spectrum and that needs silent, to be quiet for a while. There's too much signals of value bothering them, and we can bring them into a cloistered environment, calm them down, and bring them back. So they have foam pools in there, teepees. They've got the light is muted very much like it is here. This sort of looks like a sensory room to me. Okay, so I'm feeling kind of calm.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
So anyway, and I'm not talking too much, but anyway, but we renovated 24 of those to improve the experience of the child. So that's basically what the foundation does.
How do you feel? Because that work is probably something that goes unseen by a lot of individuals. I mean, in a lot of ways, you're filling the gaps as opposed to doing these large, broad stroke, sweeping initiatives that are loud and that are bombastic. You're really kind of building up the areas of slight deficiency in schools. But I have to imagine that is a lot where you're having individuals who, in most instances, aren't getting that extra 10%, that 20% that they need to really excel. As you mentioned with that third grade bottleneck there,
Right.
it's rarely, if ever, a fault of the child to not be able to read. It's something that has gone wrong, whether that be inside the school or outside the school, that is
Absolutely.
preventing
You're
them
right.
from
At that
doing
age,
so.
yeah. See, at that age, it's a lot of external factors. At high school, it becomes more of the student, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you're in 11th and 12th grade, you're not fully developed in your brain till you're 25, but you're getting there, and you make choices. So you have to inspire the student significantly in the later years, because that's where you're reading to learn. But you're absolutely right. Up to about the third and fourth grade, okay, it's the school districts and the community and the family's need. A family's job is to support that child and nurture them and give them that. And you're right. It's a foundational, but it's not as public, or not as people just don't think about it as much. So it's that silent work that's done that's really important. When I went to Japan, teachers are revered there. They don't make the best money, but they make better money than on average in the United States. But the teachers are revered because they're nurturing your children to an age where they can begin to learn, okay? In the United States, we always have great respect for teachers, but I think the teaching environment has changed a little bit, and the teachers are under stress in a lot of schools and all that. So, so we support teachers a lot, okay, with learning experiences and maybe help them. I have an idea that I want to give scholarships to teachers to go back to school and to sharpen their tools.
Tell me more about that. That sounds incredible.
Well, we do scholarships, and we've done scholarships for years, okay? It's a core competency. And we do 50, 60 scholarships and give away $50, $60, $70,000 a year. But they're one-time $1,000 scholarships, and it's always good, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. And, of course, you always try to scale up a program. So I looked at that program, and I said, well, how could you scale it up? And I learned just by, reading around that, that if you could give a four-year scholarship to one person, okay, say $1,000 a year, and connect them to the foundation, and they'll have a better connection as that student goes out and out into the world to come back home, and you have a more meaningful support. So it's not just a one-time scholarship. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking of giving multiple scholarships. Then I said, well, wait a minute. What if we helped our teachers? Because every once in a while, my phone will ring, and a teacher will say, I want to go for my master's degree so I can get a better job at the school district, or I want to get a PhD. And they're very expensive. And there are resources for them to go to. And I said, no, we don't offer those type of scholarships. And I asked myself one day, why not? Why not just do that? Mm-hmm. So I started the conversation in the school district. And I just had that conversation with Helen Weil, the deputy superintendent. And she said, yeah, why not? Let's start that journey.
Well, I think if you have teachers who are showing that desire, showing that self-initiative to want to go and better educate themselves, to improve their abilities to serve St. Lucie County and their schools, both public and private, I think that's something that is worthy of that investment. Because, as you mentioned earlier, trying to retain those high talent people is one of the largest challenges we face right now at this current juncture point that we're at. So if you have someone an opportunity, much like how a corporation might offer an MBA program to a student who's then there working for 2 years and they want them to be elevated, so they're going to go pay for that education. This is something where I think you can further bring back those individuals to reinvest themselves into the schools that really they probably cut their teeth on and have made them the great teachers that they are, and this just serves to elevate them further.
You're 100% right. When I was in commercial banking, they paid for my master's degree, right? And they said, the only thing we ask you have to work 2 years after you get the master's degree. And that was, fine, because I wanted to work there anyway. And they paid for, 75% of my degree. So I graduated without a lot of any debt, really, for my master's degree, because I funded it out of my own pocket. It took me 5 years, but I got there, But when I finally got my master's degree, I was promotable. And it took me into the senior level side of the business. And my life got much better, the whole standard of living grew. But I think you're exactly right. We have to think about our teachers, and if they want to be educated better to, teach the students, I mean, that's all of it, right? So we as a foundation can take that space and fill it in. At the very least, we can champion that idea. So I kind of see myself more, we're doers for sure. Okay, we have these programs that absolutely help out the academic programs. But I think we can also elevate some of those ideas and elevate some of those needs to the community. And there are a lot of businesses and business owners, and Travis is one of them. He cares about children, okay? He graduated from this school district, and he's here with a thriving business. And I always say to people, and I don't say this because I'm on your show, I said, Travis is the poster child, poster man, okay? You know, he lives it, you know? He has a great business. He lives here. He gives back, you know? And that's what it's all about. And there are a lot of businesses like that here in this county. We're very, very fortunate. There are also a lot of businesses that are coming into this county that we want to tell the story to. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tell the story about the value of education and where the district is, and the fact that we're at this inflection point, okay, was very, very important that we can all work with it. Now, it's also with the EDC, the Economic Development Council, very important partners in that. So they've come into the educational space now. So we're supporting them because we're the organization that would help fund the modification of those workforce readiness programs. So if they find a business that has a special need and the district wants to react to that to connect that student to that business, and I'll just make it up, let's say it's welding, they need more welders, okay? So the school district wants to create a welding program because they know that's a high-paying job, okay? Then, you know, we could help them create that program through external funding sources by reaching out to either grants or to reaching out to the local community. And that's how we do it. We also, today, if a student is in a career readiness program, they have to take a lot of certification tests. And they have to pay for those. So we pay for them. We don't want to put the burden on the student. And then what we also do is we teach them how to take the test better. There are modules you can purchase, and we fund those. So we're always in there trying to figure out the sticking points and where we can support that student to really graduate and be able to be very productive for society and themselves.
How have you seen both the education process, but also, as you allude to there, the testing process, which I know is a subject of debate for a lot of people. How have you seen that evolve over the course of your tenure? I mean, a decade, so much has changed. I mean, the integration of technology, the way that has sort of dictated a lot of our lives at this point, but I think more and more so is becoming integrated into schools, both in positive ways, as you alluded to earlier, with sort of being able to do that AI traffic and being able to give the kids, because they have so much inherent knowledge in the same way that someone who grows up around farming or grows up around agriculture has an innate understanding of that. I think kids today are so savvy and so understanding of technology to be able to put productive means of that in their hands is a great thing. But I'm sure there's a lot of elements you're fighting as well, whether that be phones, personal devices, social media, the way that those things spread. What's been the biggest shift in your mind from when you first started to where you are now?
Well, what's happened is there's two things happening. Number one, people are overloaded with signals, right? I mean, we're 24/7 now. I mean, I'm sitting in bed, you know, watching television, and I'm watching my phone. Right? This is at 10 o'clock at night. Where, you know, when I was younger, never would happen. Maybe you watch television, but you're not going to have your phone with you, you know, because you didn't have a phone that close that someone could other than dial you, right? But now you have Facebook and you got social media and all that. So you have a lot of signals coming at you, okay? And it's been proven that we don't get enough sleep because of that, okay? So our brains are in deficit all the time. So, you know, that is a societal issue that what's going to happen with technology? How are we going to be able to manage that? Because the brain needs quiet time. It just does. I can remember in my day, because you don't, because you're a young man, but I can remember in my day, the evening was quiet in our house. You know, maybe my dad played those old records that I hated, but they were playing very quietly there. He was reading the newspaper, and my mother was, you know, cleaning the house and getting the kids ready, but it was downtime for us. And now, you know, even in my household, the kids are more grown now, but, you know, we were always busy. And now it's even worse. I have students that I teach at IRSC that can't put the phone down. You know, I said, look, this is an hour class. I said, the phone has to come down because I want your full attention. And they can't do it. It's not their fault, but because they're wired that way. So that's a big issue, okay? The other issue that's upon us, and it's rapidly growing, is AI. So my view of it is, and I've learned to think about this through people like James Abbott, who knows about it and all. He said, think about the calculator, the electronic calculator. And we're old enough to know when it first came out. It was big, clunky tablet,
Yeah.
about 2 inches thick, right? And it did 1 + 1 = 2. We're like, wow, right? You didn't have to use a slide rule, or an adding machine. And at first they were banned in college. You couldn't have a calculator for anything other than maybe you did it for your own homework. But now, calculator is a tool. You can even take tests with a calculator because that's not the essence of doing the calculation. It's understanding the formula, in your brain. So what's happening with AI, if you use AI to do the homework for you, you're hurting yourself because you're not actually learning. But if you use AI to shape the product, then it's better. So I'll give you an example. If you have a student that is just using AI to get the job done, they've done tests where that student will not have any recall of the academic concepts within another 2 hours or 3 hours. It's just not in your memory bank, let alone forever, right? We should learn something. But if that student actually wrote that and then use AI to maybe shape it and maybe put it in a better format, the retention is still there because they had that cognitive experience to get it into the brain. So if it's used as a tool, it's fine. In fact, it's expanding. Like, for instance, I wrote some policies. I know what the policy should contain, and I write it down on Word. I'm typing it in, but I just needed it to look better. And AI, in about 3 seconds, will just put it in a really good context and play it out, and I'm done. So I would have spent an hour or two on that myself with word processing, and I literally had it done in 45 minutes, So it's a good tool, but, there are social issues and cognitive issues that come about, the fatigue that we talked about. So the world is getting very, very faster and faster, and there's all this metadata that's out there. So I don't really know where it's going to go, okay? But it's moving pretty quick. But I think we'll figure it out.
I would think so, and it's a lot of ways people draw the parallels. The calculator is a great example. People use kind of the horse and buggy in the car in a lot of ways. Like we are inherently an innovative population. We are people who are continually going to kind of push the envelope on what's possible and what we can bring about. And I think to your point, when it's used as a tool is when it's most effective. I think if you allow it to substitute for human creativity and human thought is where you can start to see detrimental because it only knows what it already knows. And that's a vast amount of information, but you can't provide it anything new. There's nothing original that it can come up with that hasn't been some amalgam of the information before. I'm curious what you see, because this was one of the larger debates when I myself was in high school and certainly going into college. The line between learning as the kind of end goal of school and the grade being the end goal of school. How do you find that to be in this current day and age? Because I think particularly towards my kind of end of high school, beginning of college, there was a really big push towards the grade isn't as important. It's about what you learn. It's about what you retain, what you're talking about there with the recall. But there is also that element of my scholarship is tied to a grade. My acceptance is tied to a grade. All of these elements that are data-driven because we need those points to be able to make sure that we are giving the proper opportunities to the individuals who are excelling. How do you find that dynamic to be in this day and age?
Yeah, well, grades kind of keep you on track, okay? When I was in college, actually, the first 2 years were pass-fail, okay?
Interesting.
Yeah, that was back in the 70s, okay? 1970s, previous century. But it was pass-fail, and then when you declared your major as a junior, you got your grade, okay? And that was an experiment, okay, in the college. And but the professors, all tenure professors, kept us on point. And so they demanded your attendance, they demanded your attention, and I see that in the K through 12 space. There's no grades from kindergarten to second grade. The grades start at 3 years old, okay? And so that's the same concept, okay? You're learning, okay, to master concepts. And I think it's okay. I mean, you have to watch the students and discipline. The only way I do it, because I still teach at the college level, is that they have to come there. They have to and be attentive. So I demand their attendance. I actually tell them, if you miss 2 classes, you're out. I don't want you. I mean, you're big boys and girls, and you paid for this. And if you can't, find the time for that, what are you doing? Now I'm also very lenient if there's circumstances, but I want their full attention, so I make them put their smartphones down. I say, if you have to pick it up, just leave the classroom, come back. I don't care, But And I said, but just relax and let's learn. Let's learn concepts. And then we'll work on the grade. Now, I actually started, we do discussion term papers, okay? And the last couple of years we've been, struggling with AI, and they have all kinds of software now that can pick up AI, and the professors and all, we're all going crazy. How do we know who's cheating and not cheating? So this year I started an experiment and in the class, and I said, look, the grade papers, the papers will not be graded, okay, until the end. I said, now, it doesn't mean you don't do a good job to the end, because I'm actually grading them internally, but they don't reflect on your grade book. So when you write something, I said, I don't want you to worry about the APA standard of citations. I want good grammar. I want proper spelling. And I want you to tell me the concepts that you learned and give me an example how it relates to your life, so I know it's real, and then just submit that. Take all the pressure off, because I want them to learn. I want the cognition. And then at the end, I'm going to combine all of those grades, and that's going to become your thing. And by the way, there is a paper you have to write, one that has all of those demands, okay? The proper citations and the proper standard, and then, so that's sort of like the culmination. I'm going to see how it goes, and I think it's going to come out pretty good. I take the pressure off the student. And in this course also, we don't have a textbook, because everything's available through linkages. I just put a bunch of links in there. Go look at this video. Go look at this article. Go find a chapter in this book. I just guide them. But you can go anywhere.
I think it's one of the beautiful things about modern learning is that for those of us who are more visual or more auditory, there are resources available for you to learn beyond just reading a textbook over and over, because there are individuals that's a great tool for, and there are people where that's just never going to make sense to them the way that seeing it for the first time, or doing a practice set, or having something like that where they're connecting it back to their real world experience. I think one of the largest things, and it's such a great concept that you put forth there, is when we go into the workforce, generally speaking, we have some sort of training that comes with that new job. We are being introduced into what are the systems of the place that we work at? What are the standards and expectations? How do we write emails? How do we write copy? How do we communicate in the lens of the company? So while being able to follow a set of guidelines is important, having APA, MLA, those kind of citations, I think to create the core skill set is infinitely more valuable.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. So that's what I'm kind of experimenting with. They could pick up that it's academic and the thing. And really the reason they did that originally was just to stop the plagiarism, okay? So if I say there is no plagiarism, don't worry about it, okay? But I want, I don't want you to, I said don't even cite. I mean, you go learn by these different sources. Don't repeat it, but, put it into your brain and synthesize it, and then, write a very simple, decent term paper without any citations about the concepts. That's the same question throughout the course. What are the 3 major concepts in this chapter? That's all I want. And I want you to link it to a real life experience or some example that's real, if they're a life experience or something like that. And we'll see, but I think that'll take some pressure off of it, because there's no cheating on that really. And I can tell if somebody, pretty much uses AI, I had one student that wrote a term paper and used the word whilst. That's an old English term. So I said to her one day, she came in, I says, what's the definition of whilst? She says, whilst, what is that? I said, well, it was in your term paper. She looked at me with these big eyes, I said, be careful,
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the strange things. And I for myself personally, I was always known to lead into strange things like that. I grew up in high school. I was an English kid.
Well, you might know that. That's why I asked her the definition,
and
right?
that's the thing. So when I think of that word, I'm like, I think I have used that in probably a term paper or two.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It is one of the, and I think the flip side of that is if you were to take that term paper that we talked about, using AI as a tool, it takes your thoughts and it kind of fleshes them out a little more, and you expand your vocabulary that way, that's a great thing.
Sure, absolutely.
To bring yourself to words you wouldn't have seen otherwise, that might not be in the books you're reading, that might not be on the TV you're watching, those kind of things. But you still have to do that work of understanding what it is, particularly if it's going to be your own work. What is it that I'm trying to say here? What is it that this word is kind of entailing? If I'm using Shakespearean English, does that make sense in my IRSE course? So,
and it also goes back to your point about modeling, okay? Some people learn differently. So if you could see at the end of the day a more perfect paper that models the standard of the writing, and there's two types of writing in the world: there's rich and lean. Okay, rich is the literacy world and the world of images and things. You know, your product is rich. Okay, it has detail, it has substance. Okay, business language is lean. Okay, you just got to have you got to get to the point and do it well and professionally and get the point across. You know, so I teach that, the richness of language, and then the lean part of it. Fortunately, we're more into the lean part. I mean, just fortunate, but that's what business is about. Teaching that.
I remember sitting in my senior thesis class, and I had a teacher, and she was absolutely fantastic. And she had read my first paper. She's like, "Luke, you're a fantastic writer. This is going to be horrible if you write like this in a business context."
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I of course, I'm like, "You
Far
just said
too
I was a
rich.
fantastic
Right.
writer. What was wrong?" She's like, "Well, you took about 9 sentences to say 1 sentence worth of information."
Right.
And I was like, I could see how that might be an issue
we
if I'm
teach them
writing
to cut
an
it
email.
down to the essence.
Yeah,
So yeah.
Well, and it's, again, we come back to, what are the tools available to you? Do you have the ability to do both? Because that's really what you want at the end. You don't want to be limited to, I can only write as if I was writing a corporate email, or I can only write as if I was writing a soliloquy. You want to be able to have that flexibility to go back and forth. And I think that from everything we've discussed today, and I know there's so much more, the work that you're doing with the Education Foundation and the school district is giving kids and children the opportunity to have those tools at their disposal, to be well-rounded, to be individuals who can contribute in more than one way, to have broader horizons. And on behalf of A&G and on behalf of St. Lucie County, I thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Well, you're welcome. We're really honored to have A&G Pools as a partner. I really am. I'm very honored. It's a great local company. Travis loves kids, and it shows every time. And I know the extended family here, understands that. So their product is, the best that it can be. So they know that the company could give back to the community. So thank you very much, Luke. I'm really glad to be here. I'm in a wonderful studio. It's just beautiful, and thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here, and hopefully somewhere down the line we'll have the chance to talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been so great having you here for this episode and my conversation with Thom. It's always wonderful to be able to get a larger picture of what's going on in our county and the place that we call home. So we hope you'll join us for this episode and all the episodes that are coming. If you want to watch any of our backlog, feel free to view that on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time.